Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. SoupX, the Startup Expo, North America's premier startup conference, is March 6th and 7th, 2017, in sunny Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Affordably priced, SoupX is a 2-day international conference featuring workshops, panels, speeches, a $50,000 startup competition, and over 100 exhibitors. For more information, go to sup-x.org. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Alan Alden. He's the founder and managing director at Series A Partners. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing with Series A is really interesting to me and kind of a different take on kind of the traditional investment firm in Silicon Valley. But maybe before we get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Sure. I grew up in the mean streets of Kansas, the Silicon Prairie in Kansas City.
Sure.
And went to undergrad in law school at the University of Kansas.
Okay, what made you take law, just out of curiosity?
That's a good question. I was looking at it, kind of the business route or the legal route. I just figured that I had a pretty decent business background, education growing up, and I figured that would just give me a very holistic, approach of analyzing companies, and in the business world, it just would provide something to differentiate me. And I think it just from the thought process, that's always very important to have, to understand the legal components and the ramifications of legal issues when you are working in the business world.
Sure. No, I think it's really good. It's kind of like if you have like a law degree or like an accounting degree, it can help so much in business.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I totally get that. So,
it's interesting you mentioned the accounting part, because I was just at the gym recently and a question was brought to me about accounting or another class. And I just told that person, I said, whatever you do, take accounting. It's one of the most important classes you can have and skills to have in life moving forward.
Sure. So you have quite the impressive career. You did some investment banking and kind of worked in the financial side, but I'm kind of curious to maybe know why you kind of decided to found Series A and what was the rationale behind it?
Yeah, I always love being around entrepreneurs and, really in the startup phase in the early days. There's a lot of excitement. I think it's a very challenging time. Being an entrepreneur, people don't really realize how difficult it is. It's an emotional roller coaster. Yep. You always have, I call it the trough of disenchantment. You get your excitement, and a friend of mine was at TechCrunch Disrupt. He's one of the finalists there. They had a big wave going forward, and then I remember having that conversation around a year later, where going through that tough period, and you just see how difficult it is. And I think where you can provide that support, and I think it's being able to be around really interesting people every day with great ideas. There's just not a better job in the world. I mean, I love the dynamic nature of technology to begin with, and just how it's always constantly changing. But couple that with being around that entrepreneurial spirit, and it's really a glass, half full attitude.
Sure.
That you have to have as an entrepreneur. And it's where, for me, it's a learning experience. And at the same time, if I can provide any advice and help and help these people, achieve their dreams, more power to it. And that's really what I wanted to do. And I was doing banking before, and banking provided, it's a good foundation. But if I'm going to spend 110 hours a week in an office, I'm going to do it on my own accord.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. So what kind of services do you guys kind of offer in Series A Partners?
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're advising family offices overseas and providing them, family offices and other investment groups, providing them Silicon Valley-based presence. And that's one part of it. And with that being said, there's a lot of companies out there who are wanting to make investments and again, better understand the landscape. I think one of the biggest problems you have is you have a lot of companies coming overseas, and you're seeing a big rise in corporate venture capital and other types of investment, and they all want a piece of the Valley action. They come over here, they think that they spend, 2-3 days visiting Facebook, they visit Google, stop by the Uber office. I call it the Silicon Valley petting zoo, where they just, they quickly come through. They'll hit, a couple of accelerators, stop by WeWork, Rocket Space, different places, and talk about innovation for a couple hours. But you need to have somebody on the ground here, really, who understands the landscape and has a good understanding and has a networks capable of getting in front of the right deals and the right deal flow.
Sure.
So, and I've been out here since 1998. Came in, the early days, and it really, I think, is important. One of the reasons we study history is trends repeat themselves, and that is, very true when you go through the manias and the different time periods, and it gives you a better idea of, when do you go long and, when do you pull back and ahead of that curve. It's kind of the big short scenario. I think it just gives you a better perspective on when not to get too excited about things and just gives you a little bit more of a level head. But anyway, so one part is that advisory. The second part is then kind of going back to the traditional banking side and looking at liquidity events and helping companies with capital raises as well as exit opportunities or corporate restructuring.
Okay.
And that's another part of the business, and always trying to help if those are big life events for founders, and trying to provide those services as well.
No, that's great. That's really interesting. I've never really had anybody on the show or really kind of met anybody that kind of does exactly what you guys do, right? And I think it's fascinating, because I think even just being born and raised in North America, you don't really think about outside of North America, right? And like how it's the same or different, and it's like it's just a different aspect to think about, right? That we're kind of in our own little bubble. And I totally get that a lot of people outside of that, maybe that with money to invest, kind of want to capitalize on that, and they don't understand that you kind of need to understand how things work, because I think how things work in the Valley aren't necessarily how things work in other parts of America or North America.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a good point is, I think the one thing about the Silicon Valley, which is just very unique, is its DNA, and it's the fear of, there's everywhere else in the world, there's such a huge fear of failure. And in the Valley, people don't fear it as much. I don't want to say it's a badge of honor in any way, because it shouldn't be. But with that being said, the risk level is so much higher than anywhere else in the world. I spend a lot of time in the Middle East, as well as South Africa is another country where I spend a fair amount of time. And usually I'm actually heading there on Friday. But just seeing that the tolerance for risk is in the Valley, it's like nowhere else.
Sure.
And in some ways, it's very refreshing, and I'll tell you, it's very frustrating when you're used to being around that level of risk, and then trying to be around, and you have to put yourself in check every now and then when you're talking to other investors in other parts of the world.
Sure.
And it is definitely a different mindset.
So,
but yeah, go on.
What is their big struggle? They want to limit their risk as much as possible, or what are their kind of struggles with potentially investing in US-based startups?
Well, I think you look at the typical model, the VC model. If you invest in 10 companies, one will be a home run if you're lucky.
Sure.
And then 2 will be, decent, double triples. And then the other ones, you'll see where they fall. But it's a much, you're betting on, you're putting 10 horses out there, but, realistically, those numbers dwindle very quickly. And whereas if you're a typical investor, coming from other industries, you're looking for the singles and doubles all day.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's a great investment strategy depending on what you're doing. And it's just, it's all about assumption of risk and understanding it. And with risk comes return.
Sure.
And so it's just definitely different. And, you look at the Middle East where, they have, traditionally invested a lot in natural resources, be it, energy, oil, things like that, as well as building. And Dubai is a place where, as one of the guys, gentleman at Dubai Holding mentioned, he's like, we're very good at building boxes and selling boxes, being expensive selling apartments and buildings. And their understanding of technology and technology risk, it's harder for them to get their arms around.
Sure.
And so, it's just getting people very comfortable with that.
Okay. So do you find that like they have trouble kind of innovating, or they struggle to do kind of different innovative things in other parts of the world, or?
No, not at all.
No.
And
Okay.
I think it's very interesting when you look, and I think that's the problem with the bubble of the Silicon Valley is you don't appreciate some of the innovation that is going on in other parts of the world.
Okay.
I think look at mobile payments. Mobile payments have really had mobile wallets especially
Sure.
have really had a huge problem in getting traction in the States. I mean, Google has spent a fortune on trying to get it in the Android and get people to get that uptake.
Yep.
And you look at a platform like M-Pesa in Kenya, 70% of the GDP of Kenya is going through a mobile payments platform.
Wow.
A lot of that is SMS-based payments. I mean, we're talking old school phones, leveraging those to make payments.
Right. Interesting.
And you just have to understand and with that being said, on the other side of the continent, in Nigeria, you have basically 0.1% of the GDP going through mobile payments because there's such a distrust of, there's endemic corruption and distrust of the system where you could be on the same continent, but it's a world apart.
Right. Interesting.
And going back to innovation, I think one of the best entrepreneurs in the world is Sheikh Mohammed of Dubai.
Okay.
I mean, taking a country in the early 1990s, well, his father, they realized that they were very low on natural resources and they were going to be gone within 20 years. And they, figured out a way of making something out of nothing and building up Dubai to what it is today.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and just, using tourism, who would have thought that you could sell an apartment in what used to be a complete desert for $20 million? I mean,
sure, right? That's amazing.
It really is amazing. They have one of the, they have huge commodity exchanges and, other types of platforms that have been built there. And, 85% of the people living in Dubai are expats. And they were very smart, offer, low to no taxes, and you get very smart people coming there. And, they figure out very creative ways to quietly tax those people and make lots of money in the meantime.
Huh.
So
that's fascinating to me. See, I love kind of just hearing how people do these things elsewhere. And so I know when we kind of talked originally, there's a lot of kind of trying to figure out how to monetize things can be really challenging for people, or, a lot of apps are getting kind of cloned. They're maybe not that successful in North America, or maybe they are, but they get cloned and moved into other parts of the world where they're potentially even bigger. Have you seen quite a lot of that?
Yeah, I think it goes both ways, definitely. I mean, the Samwer brothers out of Germany are probably the best and most well-known cloners out there.
Okay.
They cloned Groupon originally, and they're billionaires.
Okay.
And their company is called Rocket, and they had a little bit more difficulty the last couple of years, but they've made a fortune over the last 15. And they made a Groupon clone, launched it internationally. They've made, they've modeled. They just take great U.S. ideas and take it into Africa, Europe, and other parts of the world.
Interesting.
And really roll that out quickly. And you're seeing people copying, let's say, OpenTable or other types of platforms. I mean, even Uber. There were early Uber platforms, in Dubai being one. But one company that probably the largest, one of the largest technology investors in the world is based out of Cape Town.
Really?
And a company called company called Nospers. It's a
Huh.
$70 billion company by market cap. And they made a little bet on a company in China in 1999. They put, I think it's just a little bit under 40 million on a little company called Tencent.
Okay.
And Tencent now is, right up there with Alibaba.
Sure.
Tencent owns WeChat. WeChat has around 700 million users in China on their messaging platform.
Wow.
And so, but since then, that value is, the market cap of Nospers is, as I said, 70 billion, and that's approximately the same value as their WeChat stake or their Tencent stake. But they also own 17% of Flipkart, which is the largest e-commerce site in India. They own a majority stake of Souk.com in the Middle East, which is the largest e-commerce site in the Middle East. They just sold, one of the largest auction sites, Allegro, that was in Poland for, I think it was 2.4 billion last month.
Wow.
And they're taking big stakes, and they just established a VC arm here in the United States, built up an office here within the last year in San Francisco. So it'd be really interesting to see how they come into the U.S. and the impact that they have moving forward as they continue to diversify.
Sure. How do you find cultural differences like hinder or help, or does it even really matter? Because it's got to matter at some level, right? And I'm not saying like that in a negative way. It's just how, people do things in North America or even state to state can be different than, certain parts of the world. How have you found that?
Yeah, well, it's always good to understand, the customs and culture, and when you're going to different areas. I mean, especially in the Far East, Middle East, depending if it's more conservative or not. And I think you have to respect those traditions. Sure. And definitely, be open to that. And it can be very frustrating too. And I'm sure for, in the parts of the Middle East, for women entrepreneurs or other groups, it's, it's difficult. But just make sure, I think the key thing is to have a very good champion that will help you succeed in those areas. And the other thing is just really networking and figuring out that landscape as quick as possible. I mean, who are the influencers, the players, and aligning yourself accordingly.
Sure. So when you say champion, do you mean somebody in that country that that can kind of help you with things, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So a good example is my first introduction when I went to Dubai was we were working with the Ministry of Finance.
Okay.
In the UAE, and we had a member of their team bring us into the country. We were working on an all-in-one card, a competitor to Coin.
Okay.
At the time, and they were very interested in the technology and adopting that for several different uses. And so the gentleman who brought us there he was awesome, but introduced us into a lot of other areas, the Road and Transport Authority, Dubai Holding, and other groups who are interested in technology and with other different potential use cases, as well as people like MasterCard and Visa locally, and figuring out who the main people were, working on that, on the ground there, as well as then other regional investors too, with investors or influencers in Saudi and the other GCC countries, Gulf Coast countries in that area.
No, yeah, that's fascinating to me. I love that kind of stuff, right? And there's how you guys do that kind of stuff. But how do you open the doors to these other countries or these companies when you're across the world, really? Like you're divided by ocean, right?
Well, it's the world's becoming very flat.
Sure.
I mean, luckily for us, it's amazing how technology, be it, Skype or whatever it is, and, WhatsApp and, all these technologies have basically made communication brought down to zero.
Yeah.
And it's just all a matter of dealing with time zones and just, syncing the calendars and this and that. And, that's when you're dealing with other parts of the world, the 11-hour difference can be sometimes difficult and taxing, but it is what it is. And but I think if you just spend your time and do your due diligence on what you're trying to achieve, that you can definitely flatten that problem, the geographic problem, very quickly.
Sure. So how often throughout the year would you say you're traveling to other countries? Is it half time, a quarter of the time?
I would say probably around 20%.
Okay, that's not too bad.
No, no, it's I'll be gone for a couple of weeks here this time, and I do it 3 to 4 times a year that I'll be making those trips.
Okay, and then obviously you're just constantly in contact through Skype or email or the phone or other chat clients, talking to different people across the world. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's exactly how we operate, and just to maximize everybody's time. And again, what people are interested in is, I need to be on the ground here too. So a lot
Right.
of my value comes from my presence.
Sure.
And yes, it's fun to travel and do that, but at the same time, you need to remember why you're here. Keep up relations, but there's a lot of people to see here in the valley.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I know you're big on kind of innovation and kind of talking about that. What do you kind of see as the kind of the next up and coming thing? Like, is it AI? Is it VR? Is that kind of ship kind of sailed already? What do you kind of see in the innovation space?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I think AR excites me more than VR. I
Okay.
think VR, there's definite use cases for VR, I think, from medical and isolated instances. I just think from a social aspect, it's so isolating. It's not like you're going to be on a VR headset on a subway. You
Yeah,
just
fair.
really, from a safety perspective. And it's bad enough, I think, with phones and technology and how isolating the technology is, become. But I think VR is going to be more difficult. So I do see the use cases more limited. AR, on the other hand, where you are able to experience, the augmented reality aspects. I mean, HoloLens and seeing some of the early demos of what's coming out is really exciting.
Sure.
It's scary of what is possible with these platforms, and we're early days on that, and we'll see how. I think that we'll see how that matriculates and how that evolves. But I think near term, I think conversational commerce is very exciting with also AI. I mean, I think everybody's talking about AI. It's just really understanding good use cases for that, for the technology, and how do you speed up a process or automate a process, and do it well. So I've been working with companies. One of a passion project I've been working on is anti-sexting platform.
Oh, interesting.
A friend of mine has a company called Safe.ai,
Okay.
and his name is Heath Ahrens. He was the founder of iSpeech, built that up to 60,000 developers developing off of it.
Wow.
In the meantime, he's built a very strong AI and image recognition platform, and he's used that and tweaked it to detect pornography and also bullying language and things like that. And sexting is one of the fastest growing problems among children.
Sure.
And with this situation, technology has created a problem. Platforms like Snapchat are accelerating the problem. And as technologists, it's our job to help alleviate and empower parents with the ability to once again take control of their children's digital lives. So that's one area where I see AI and image recognition being, very helpful, and once again, empowering people, especially parents, to benefit children,
Sure.
and at least benefit a group
So
very directly.
I'm curious, like I think it's great, like playing in that space, but like the biggest challenge has to be getting the users onto these platforms, or have you guys found a way kind of around that where they can use whatever they want and then the OS monitors that, or an app on the OS monitors what's happening in all these apps? Like, is that even possible?
Well, this is a difficult place. So we're going to the device manufacturers now and talking
Oh,
about
okay.
this.
I got you.
You have to go into the OS, and
Sure.
we put video out on Facebook we've done a lot of A/B testing quietly in the background of different aspects of the platform. We put just a kind of a PSA video,
Okay.
personal service announcement, and we seeded it with a very small amount of money, $700, and we were able to get around 5 million views with that
Wow,
pretty
that's
quickly.
awesome.
Yeah, so it just showed us that there was really a need, and there was over 75,000 shares. It showed us that people were interested, and that it was a topic that resonated well with parents,
Sure.
and that was going down the right path. But yes, this is one where we're going to be working with the device manufacturers because it does have to integrate into the OS. If you were to release this as an app, you'd just be playing whack-a-mole,
Yeah.
or as an SDK. So that's the tough part about it. And again, that is, it's getting people to buy into the vision. And I think quickly anybody who has a child understands that there's a problem.
Yeah.
And so, but that's an extreme case though, because there's a lot of other AI where the use case isn't so apparent, but there is definitely a great benefit. Yes, and how do you get people on board with that? And it is working. That's where partnerships and just trying to figure out how do you accelerate that distribution and leveraging platforms like Facebook or other social media channels to get that word out.
Sure.
And
Go ahead. Sorry.
it's really a case by case basis. I think when you approach that, depending on what your who your target audience is, and what that demographic looks like. So
Sure.
you can't really pigeonhole it.
No, that makes sense. And really, really depends on kind of the screen size you're trying to target too, right? Because sometimes what works on mobile doesn't necessarily work on the web, or what works inside of an app doesn't necessarily work anywhere else. And it seems to me anyway, and I think you and I were kind of talking about this when we talked weeks ago, that Facebook obviously is monetized like crazy, and they figured it out, and they kind of even figured out how to monetize their mobile app, but their chat app, for example, they haven't really figured out how to monetize their chat app, where when they've split them apart from each other, and if they're struggling to monetize that, it's kind of like, well, was that the right call, or are they going to move back together, or are they going to figure out how to monetize, or kind of what's your, not necessarily just about Facebook, but what's your take on kind of how to monetize on the different kind of platforms and different screen sizes?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I think it's a case by case basis. But as far as the monetization goes for Facebook, when it comes to the app, really with the messaging apps, everybody is trying to copy the WeChat platform. And WeChat was started in China, again by Tencent, and they are averaging almost $7 of annual revenue per user on WeChat. And with Facebook, their global ARPU is annual revenue per user is around $4.
Wow.
So it just shows you how strong WeChat has been, and where a lot of that revenue is coming from is from gaming. And almost 50% of the revenue is coming from gaming. And what you just saw Facebook do last week or 2 weeks ago was launch a new gaming platform on Messenger.
I'm sure.
So we're in the early days of monetization, and I think Facebook hired David Marcus, who is an amazing guy. I mean, he was former head of PayPal. And when you're coming from PayPal, you probably know a few things about payments.
Sure.
And, so when it comes to that side, I think the question that Facebook is always faced with is, you have to be somewhat neutral, take somewhat of a Switzerland approach to broaden your potential monetization audience, and you work with other advertisers and people like that. You just can't upset too many people. But how do you do that and still make the most money for yourself?
Sure.
And they're just going very they're taking a very slow approach to it, but they will be doing very, very big things in the next 24 to 36 months.
Sure.
And you look at Facebook Connect and the ubiquity that from an ID identification standard across the web and what that provides for you. Think about how easily they could apply something like that with payments.
Mm-hmm.
And we all can realize very quickly how that will change the game. And again, identity is another part that they own. They know so much about you as it is that with payments and the anti-fraud aspects of what they'll be able to have will be immense.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that is only going to get stronger as they develop deeper AI and machine learning with all these little pieces that they're collecting about you.
Sure.
And so give it time. They talk about the Facebook feed is almost hitting a saturation point. There's plenty of other areas of monetization for them.
Sure.
Moving.
The other thing I'm curious about to get your take on is obviously like the Amazon Echo's been out for a while. Google just launched Google Home. Apple has Siri that they just recently put into their new version of their OS, and like Android and the iPhone have had Siri and Android's chat service, whatever, Google Now. How do you think that they're going to monetize these services long term when you're literally talking at things, right? And in a lot of cases, you're not even looking at anything.
Well, it's a great question. And, it's interesting that we are slowly moving, and I think AR is going to help facilitate this, moving away from the traditional screen.
Sure.
And, we've gone from, the monitor to a phone to, something that will probably be less, if non-existent. And it's going through the screenless UI, be it in a car and other areas. And it's hard to get used to that and thinking about that change.
Totally.
But that is where, I briefly mentioned before about conversational commerce. Conversational commerce will be a huge driver moving forward. And it's just having that ability where you don't have to necessarily type in all the inputs, but having your phone and having that platform that you're talking into, be it Google or Amazon, where it's location aware. They know where you are. If, let's say, I want to buy a plane ticket, they know that I'm in San Francisco and I want to fly tomorrow to LA on United and use my frequent flyer number, that those items are stored, that they could figure out, what you want to buy on time or this or that. Through a quick series of questions, you can just purchase that ticket.
Sure.
And you really need a screen for that. And so, we're in the early days, and I think what you're seeing with Echo and these other platforms is they're testing that out. And they're really learning the best ways to perfect that user experience. I mean, this is a really new world of UX that we're not used to. And it takes a while for people to adapt to these types of platforms.
Sure. Because part of me is wondering if you just ask like the Echo or Google Home something as simple as like, I need a plumber now, like from the AdSense side of that, if it's even called AdSense, do you get the first recommended plumber that pays the most per like voice click, for lack of a better term, and they send you a plumber or whatever, and Google gets, I don't know, $1 or whatever for sending them that lead, or maybe it's $5 or maybe it's $10, who knows, right? But like that's stuff I've been thinking about anyway.
It's a huge problem, and I think you could say find me the cheapest plumber, or find me the most highly rated, or one that there's different conditions that you could put on that, and it's something you have to think about, because once you do remove that interface, you don't have that your selection becomes very limited.
Yeah.
And as we know, on the other end, they're going to do what maximizes their profitability.
Totally.
And ads in the future will be based they're doing it now, targeted by zip code or whatever it may be, and to give you that top level priority, people will pay more. So yes, that's a problem. But Amazon's doing that today.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't realize that Amazon, it's not always the cheapest that they're giving you the first. If you dig in, you'll realize there's other providers,
Sure.
and it's to that benefit. So that happens today, and you just have to be, more cognizant of it, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. And like I know like Spotify, for example, if you don't pay for their monthly service, they'll give you like if you watch this like few minute video, you get like 30 minutes of no ads, right? So there's ways to do that stuff. Or like you said, Pandora, for example, gives you rate like ads based on your location, which makes sense. So I they'll figure out how to do it, right?
Well, absolutely. And I think with the content aware advertising, it's definitely there already. And I think the more with machine learning and putting multiple variables together, the targeting will just get better. And there's so much that you can learn from users today, from their phones, their habits. It's scary. It really is. I mean, I've been dealing with AI companies who can basically tell within around an 80% degree of accuracy of how much you make,
Really?
just by looking at the images on your phone, and those images never leave the phone. And you just using AI and looking at the underlying brands that you wear, looking at just your lifestyle that's based on your photo roll. And you don't realize it, but many times you are clicking to give them the right to look at those photos, and companies will take full advantage of that.
Sure. I guess that makes a lot. Yeah, that makes sense because the more convenience you're willing to give up, the more you're kind of giving away to
Absolutely.
somebody to provide that convenience to you.
No, that's been the Google model all along.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. And you want free storage, of course, but they're going to look at all your pictures and everything else to learn more about you.
Sure.
And everything comes at a price. But you think about it, they can tell, okay, here's a zip code where you live, where you spend a preponderance of your time. They can tell if you travel, if you're recently engaged or not, or married, just by wedding rings and pictures, children, wives, husbands, mistresses. They can tell a lot of different things.
Sure.
And they'll target ads accordingly. And you're going to see that happen more and more moving forward.
Sure. No, that's fascinating. Well, Alan, we're kind of coming to the end of the show, so maybe let's close the show with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself and Series A online.
I appreciate that, Kevin. Yeah, you can go to www.series.com, and you can find my whole background there. And also feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Perfect.
And I'll definitely respond back.
Perfect, man. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a safe trip to South Africa.
Thank you very much. Have a great holiday.
All right, you
I appreciate
too. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.